Hello again. In this workshop, we will hear from Imtiaz Dharker, who will be speaking to us about poetry. Imtiaz is an award-winning poet, artist, and video filmmaker whose poems have featured widely on BBC Radio, television, and the London Underground, and on Mumbai buses. Imtiaz was born in Lahore, Pakistan, and grew up in Glasgow, Scotland. And the main themes of her work are home, freedom, displacement, and gender. Let's hear what Imtiaz has to say.
My name's Imtiaz Dharker, and I'm a poet and an artist and a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. That means I'm part of a fellowship, a collection of workers in words, because our words are the tools that we have access to build and weld and hammer together a novel or a short story or an essay or a poem. And in this workshop today, we're going to explore creative writing through the form of poetry. The title of this workshop is If Freedom is a Room. I discovered early on that poetry gave me the freedom I didn't have in real life. The empty page belonged to me and no one else. It was my space, my rules. And I could make up the rules as I went along. So the space could be as small or as big as I wanted. And as I grew up, the poetry space became bigger and bigger for me. And that is what began to feel to me like freedom. Poetry made me pay close attention to things and listen very carefully. So what I do when I'm looking for a poem is I go out into stations and streets. I eavesdrop shamelessly on conversations in cafes, on trains, on the street. And I see it as part of my job as a poet to listen to the world around me, not just what people say, but how they say it, the space between the words, the hesitations, the accent, the odd usage, even the different languages. For me, it's like mining treasure, and some of it finds its way into the poems. So there's eavesdropping of all kinds and at every kind of level, because I'm listening to human voices, of course, but also listening in on the world, to nature, social shifts, the secrets of the heart. For me, poetry is involved with the world. It's not afraid to get its hands dirty, because it's always been about making sense of the everyday, acknowledging the mess of life, seeing it at an odd angle and putting words to it. One of the things I like best about poetry is that it can use small everyday things to talk about huge ideas. The poet Pablo Neruda, who was a Nobel laureate, even wrote an ode to his socks. At one level, you could read it as a poem about loving his new socks, but he's also using it to say something huge about how to live, feeling free to take the joy of life. He says, and this is not the whole poem, it's just an excerpt. 2 socks as soft as rabbits. I slipped my feet into them as though into 2 cases knitted with threads of twilight and goatskin. Violent socks. My feet were 2 fish made of wool, 2 long sharks, sea blue. Nevertheless, I resisted the sharp temptation to save them somewhere, as schoolboys keep fireflies, as learned men collect sacred texts. I resisted the mad impulse to put them into a golden cage. So you can see how he has skipped from socks to sacred text, to imprisonment, and to the idea of freedom in the space of a few lines. And he doesn't draw a moral from this. He leaves that to the reader. Today, I want to think of a huge word, freedom. It's an abstract word. And one of the things I usually say to students is try not to use abstract words in a poem. So this is a kind of a challenge. How do you take a huge abstract word like freedom and turn it into something that breathes like a living thing? That's what we'll work on today. And the title I've given this workshop is If Freedom is a Room. But that's just a working title. And who knows, by the time you finish, you might decide to change it into something else altogether, like if freedom is a person, or if freedom is an empty page, or if freedom is a buffalo. I find that in a poem, I often start with an image that sticks in my mind. For example, one day I just saw some eggs in a wire basket hanging off the edge of a rickety shack in Bombay. And that started a whole series of poems about a fragile world and finding the miraculous kind of survival that goes on, even in the midst of fragility. So let's look at a way of stirring up a poetry of images. Take your paper, just any A4, and write at the top, if freedom is a room. And then draw a box, quite a big square, easy enough. Just that box. If freedom is a room, the lines you've drawn are walls. So begin to write sentences along the walls. What are they made of? What do they feel like? What do they look like? Are they really there at all? Take a few minutes to do this. So, if freedom is a room, its walls are, carry on the sentences and write around the walls of the room. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. The second part of this exercise is that you go into the middle of the square. Close your eyes. Remember a time in your own life when you had a strong sensation either of being free or of not feeling free at all, of feeling constricted. You may choose either one of those to write into your square, but that should be a memory you have. It should be personal to you. Write that in the middle because that'll be the core of your poem. If you want to write more than a sentence, do that. You closed your eyes to think of that. Open your eyes right into the middle of the room. The word for room in Italian is stanza, and that's a verse in poetry. So that moment of not being free or being free sits in the heart of your stanza, your poem. Remember what it felt like. What are the sounds you associate with it? What are the smells? And on to the third part of the exercise. You know where I'm going. Outside the walls. Open a door out of the square. Throw open the windows. Somehow get out of that square, out of the room. What do you hear? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Write those sentences outside the box. What you can do is use this material to make 3 stanzas of a poem. So start with, on a fresh sheet of paper now, using your notes as the material you're going to use for the verse. Begin your first verse, maybe 4 lines if you want to. They can rhyme, they don't have to rhyme. They can have, but the main thing is they should have a musicality. They should have something that holds those lines together, that makes you feel there's music in them. I don't want it to be prose that's just cut up. So take even 4 lines and write about the walls. Use the material from all your senses that you have to write about what the walls of that space were. In the next stanza, take that moment of feeling free or feeling constricted and write 4 lines about that. You can draw on all the images you have from the walls themselves, link one thing to the other, let the sets of images slide off against each other. Now step outside. You've stepped outside, but you still have the memory of what's inside. So link to that and then write another 4 lines. Not just describing, but uniting the idea of what's outside and all the sensations that you wrote down, all the lines you wrote down, link some of that with what was inside as well. Maybe even link it to the walls. And then stretch outwards to something which is beyond what's outside. Is there something wider, something bigger that you would have liked to go to, that was even bigger than the idea that you started with? Don't just stop when you finish those 4 lines. Just think a little more. When you've written down all those 3 stanzas, start to cut. Begin to cut out things that look unnecessary. Begin to cut out the frills. Because one of the biggest parts of poetry is what you don't use. It's the silences, it's the end of the line, it's the white page. Don't be afraid of the silence. And don't be afraid to cut, because things that you think are precious in that poem are very often things that you can let go of. So let go of everything that you don't need. Cut it down to the bone. See what's left. All the way through this whole exercise, I've wanted you to use real sensations, real things, concrete images, not abstract words. But remember, you're the authority. This is your life, your choices, your space, your memories, your senses. Nobody else is in charge of that, and nobody else can tell you what to do with that space. But remember, it starts with paying close attention to yourself, to your own feelings, to your own sensations, but also linking that to something that's happening out in the world, listening very carefully, noting every detail that goes on around the experience. If you're dealing with abstract ideas, try to make them live. Smack them alive, using all the earthly sensations you have. In his essay, Towards an Impure Poetry, Pablo Neruda speaks of a poetry impure as the clothing we wear, as our bodies, soup-stained, soiled with our shameful behavior, our wrinkles and vigils and dreams, observations and prophecies, declarations of loathing and love, idylls and beasts, the shocks of encounter, political loyalties, denials and doubts, affirmations and taxes. There's nothing out of the scope of that poem. So again, remember, the space is your page. You have the freedom to do what you like on it in that space. Because as Neruda said, poetry can speak about everything from gas bills to war, the whole messy business of living. It can be funny or angry or soothing or subversive. In a time when people are being bombarded with devalued words, poetry works with the pulse of the blood and the pulse of language. It gets beneath the skin of the world to something that feels more truthful than facts. It's like a human heartbeat given words. So now you're going to do something that's going to take a little courage. After I've finished, just begin to share what you have in class. Each one of you, with whatever you have, stand up and read what you have to all the others in the room. If you're all alone, read it to yourself. Because what that will do is it'll tell you, slightly give you an idea of where you are with it. It'll tell you if there's any music in those words, because reading aloud is such an important part of the whole process of writing the poem. It tells you if there's a rhythm to what you're doing. It tells you if the words stand up to being listened to in a space. So do stand up and read to each other, whatever it is, even if you feel you haven't finished, even if you feel you still have work to do on it, do read to the rest of the class now. And then afterwards, I'd like you to maybe spend time at home and work on the poem, make it into something that you think is maybe a finished poem, and come back and in about a week's time share it with everyone else there. And also, if you're on your own, read it to yourself a week later. Very often things look different when you look at them later. Time's a great writer of poems as well, and it's a great cutter of poems too. And I've been talking about poetry, but all this is worth remembering when it comes to writing your essay for the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition, no matter what form you choose to write in. Most of all, words are there to be used with pleasure and definitely not to be squandered. It's the way to answer back, for you to stand up to the bullies of language. It's an act of subversion, and it's far too powerful to be controlled or contained. It's your free space. So thank you for taking part in this workshop. I hope you've enjoyed being in the poetry room and hope it's helped you to see how much freedom you have when you come to writing your essay for the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition. Good luck to all of you.